saying that I'm really thankful to GDC, RIS, and PHFI to have included communication as an important topic for discussion, because normally we consider this as something not very not very important considering the clinical management of the illness. But once we have a discussion, I'm sure you'll find that this has its own role to play in the patient care. There's no doubt that I'm sorry, the presentation has got, okay, yeah. There is no doubt that, that we are facing a very challenging time that we had never seen earlier. Emotions are definitely very high and there's a lot at stake. Lives are really at risk, and not just in our country, all across the world. Everyone is feeling very anxious and confused because we are still not, we don't have a very ready reckoner for the treatment of the illness. Healthcare professionals, being the frontline warriors, are all the more stressed out as they are the one who are facing the brunt of the situation. So in these times, communication becomes a very, important, it plays a very big role, because communication can make it or break it. Any miscommunication or missed communication with the patient, with their family, or even with your team can actually create havoc. So we got to be really vigilant about the communication that we make. So if I say we make actually three kind of communication, one is with the patient and their family, which will actually require a lot of patience and understanding of human behavior, understanding that how people behave differently when they're under stress and how do they communicate differently, and even their communication needs also vary because of the stress that they are experiencing. Second is again your communication with your team and your staff, because they are the one who are going to participate with you in the patient care, and you really need to keep your morale up and also keep their morale up and boost them up, because we expect them to give their best to the patient care. And third communication is your communication with general public and media, because again, any wrong communication, any miscommunication can also create trouble for any one of us. Now let's take an example. If there's a patient who has to be put on, who requires quarantine, and just one second, like this bar, can I move it? Okay.
It's not moving.
Is it moving now?
No, we cannot see that actually. We can just see the heading.
Okay. So let's take an example. For example, if there's a patient or a family, you think that the patient requires quarantine. The moment you will tell this to the patient that you require quarantine or you need to be put under quarantine, chances are that they are going to say that, no, we don't want to go for it. That's because they think that they don't need it, or maybe they are not going to do any harm to anybody. So usually they will resist quarantine and there will be strong denial. They may say that, how could I be positive? I never met anybody who is, corona affected. I can't be sick, or maybe your report is not okay. So this kind of denial you will see when the patient will be asked to, go for quarantine. They may even promise you that let me not go to the hospital or to the quarantine place. I'll stay at home and I'll take all precautions and will not, disturb anybody or trouble anybody. Now, this is something denial to illness. We got to understand that this is not the patient, but it is the disease that is speaking, because we all have denial to illness, and we have to deal with this in a firm but non-aggressive way. Usually when the patient or the family denies or they don't cooperate, we feel bad and we become aggressive and unhappy with this situation. But we got to understand that this is also part of the illness. Denial to illness is also part of the illness. So we really need to help them see the benefits of quarantine and the risk of not following the guidelines. Now, let me tell you one thing. If you try to tell them that there's a risk to society or to people around you or to people in the neighborhood, trust me, they will be least interested to understand that point. But we need to make them understand the risk to their family, especially to their kids and to their elderlies in the family. So that can act as a motivating factor for them to, agree to go for quarantine. So you can use data and you can use your reports to help them see your point of view, how when people did not go for quarantine, how they infected others, or how, people in the family also got affected because of the, not following the guidelines. So these are some of the communication tools that will come handy. I'm going to discuss all of them very briefly in the today's presentation. For example, your communication style plays a very big role in deciding what kind of communication you're going to have. There are 4 types of communication. One, that is passive communication. Usually when people don't agree with us, or when they don't listen to us, or when they don't follow our instructions, Some of us might actually withdraw from the situation or become quiet and would wait for somebody else to take the lead and handle the situation. So that's more like a passive communication where we decide willfully to withdraw from the situation. There's another communication style where we may not withdraw from the situation, but internally we are very unhappy with the person. We don't like the person's behavior or their communication way. So we don't go and talk to the person, but indirectly we'll either become sarcastic with the person, or will be rude, or may also become little aggressive with them, or may go and complain against them. Third communication style is aggression, when we are not able to control our temper, when we are not able to peacefully handle the situation, we lose our control and we become aggressive with the person. It could be the patient, it could be patient's family, or it could be even our colleague or team member. So these are the three common communication styles we all tend to use, especially in a stressful situation. The correct communication style is assertion. Assertion is when you are able to say whatever you have to say without losing your control. Your language remains calm and decent. Your tone of voice is firm but not rude or aggressive or offensive. At the same time, your body language is appropriate to communicate seriousness of the message. So I can say in a nutshell that the communication can be divided in three parts. One is your language, second is your tone of voice, and third is your body language. So let's understand each one of them in detail. For example, if I talk about the language, make sure that you use simple, respectful, and decent language with the patient or with their family or even with your team members. How much ever the stressful situation is, we have no right to use indecent or derogatory language towards anybody. So use of words that are comforting and helpful, they are going to actually create a more calm environment to work with. So consciously you have to stay calm and speak slowly. See, calmness and peace would not come automatically. You have to be mindful of it, because if you're working in a stressful situation, any small issue can get triggered and can go out of proportion. So you have to mindfully stay calm and also speak slowly. So when you speak slowly, you get time to design your communication, you get time to choose your words, and then you're also able to see what is going to be the impact of my communication. So one more thing that I can advise you here is develop this habit of listening more and speaking less. I shared in the previous webinars also that one day I received a phone call from one of the team member working at the control room who are dealing with the phone calls for COVID-19. So they said they are receiving more than 1,000 calls per day around corona, and they really get exhausted in the process of answering all those questions. Of course, there are around 8 to 10 members at a time on duty, but it becomes very challenging to continuously talk. And I mean, in one day itself, they felt they are completely exhausted. So one tip that I gave them was that allow the person to speak. Most of the times the calls are when they are anxious or panicking. They just want to speak to somebody and talk about their problem. So one good skill that we can practice here is first listen to them, allow them to complete. Listening itself act as a therapy for the patient. So you can make a note of the points that they are saying, whatever key points that you want to address after they have finished, you can pick up those 1 or 2 points and answer those questions. So similarly in your workplace, develop this habit of, listening more and speaking less. The thumb rule is 80% of listening and 20% of talking. Usually when we are interacting with the patient and their family, we have a tendency to talk more. So that's going to actually exhaust you of the energy. Again, in the workplace, and avoid snubbing others, especially your subordinates, for example, your nursing staff or your support staff or housekeeping staff. If you shout at them, if you snub them, they are going to get demotivated. So they are not going to be happy to work for you. It's a stressful situation. We require everybody's cooperation and it's a teamwork. So we got to make sure that we don't disturb and upset others, even if they are at a subordinate position than ours. Because any kind of snubbing or being rude or arrogance will flare up the aggression on both the sides, and it is going to affect your mental health as well as the mental health of your team members. So as words are important, so is your how you deliver those words. So for example, your speech delivery, your speed of talking, the quality of your tone or your pitch, everything has an impact on your communication. Communication is not what you say, but it is how you say. So you have to make sure that your the tone of voice or your voice is well modulated. You should sound confident, knowledgeable, firm, but at the same time non-aggressive. We have, and especially in an authority position, we have a tendency to become aggressive with people. We take it for granted that I have the right to become authoritative and aggressive with people. But that is something that we really, really need to, stop or control ourselves. You need to be soft when you're talking to people, but at the same time, you should be audible. Especially if you're using a lot of PPE, there's a possibility that you will not be easily heard. So you got to make sure that you look at the person, make eye contact, and then you talk. Especially the communication that you will be making with the patient or their family or even with your team members, some of the terms are going to be absolutely new and unfamiliar to them. So again, you need to be soft and audible so that they can understand what you are communicating. So at your workplace, please avoid any kind of high pitch, high tone, shrieking, shouting kind of a voice, because please remember you are going to be at your workplace for maybe 8 to 10 or even more number of hours. So if you have a tendency to shout or use high pitch, high tone voice, just imagine your state of health at the end of your duty. So if you want to really, really, have some energy at the end of the day, avoid this kind of communication in your workplace. So make sure that you check your tone of voice that you are using. As I said, language has one, a contribution to make. Second is tone of your voice. So 10% of the conflicts are because of the wrong words. 90% of the communication are because of the wrong tone of voice. So make sure that your tone of voice is responsible. It should not sound casual. For example, I've given you certain, features of inappropriate tone of voice. The moment you will appear casual, disinterested, unconcerned, inconfident, rude and authoritative and aggressive, that's going to break your communication with whomever you are making. It could be your team member, it could be your colleague, it could be your patient or their family. So right tone of voice would be when you sound sincere, you are responsible, you are confident, and you are soft and polite, and simultaneously you are assertive. Third component of communication is your body language. You'll be surprised to know that we communicate only 7% through words. 38% of the communication is through tone of voice, and 55% of the communication is through your body language. And incidentally, we are hardly any mindful of our body language when we are communicating with patients or with our colleague. So, for example, face is mirror of your mind. So anytime if you're having any thoughts and feelings of anger, irritability, unhappiness, attitude, that's going to be reflected right on your face. The person with whom you are communicating, they are immediately get to understand that you are not happy with them, or you are irritated with them, or you have a negative attitude toward them. So very mindfully, we have to remember to keep our facial expressions calm and neutral. Especially if you stay calm and neutral, you are going to create more peace and serenity around you at the workplace. Eye contact, especially when you're talking to your patient, their family member, or with your team member, make sure that you make eye contact with them when you're talking to them. Eye contact communicates that you are, serious in the communication. You are attentive in talking to them. You can also communicate your compassion, care, concern through eye contact. And eye contact also brings seriousness in the person who is listening to you. So very important here is to understand that the patients and their family members' communication needs are going to be slightly different from day-to-day life. In this intense situation, they are going to be more panicking and more stressful than us because they lack knowledge and understanding of the illness. And also they have been bombarded with a lot of communication from WhatsApp and other social media, which could be right or which could also be wrong. So their communication needs are actually heightened at this moment, especially if the patient's condition is very, very serious. So they are going to be feeling very confused and anxious about the patient condition. Let's remember, the moment they are diagnosed with something like COVID-19, or if the condition is critical, the immediate thought that will come to their mind is fear of death. They fear that the patient will die. So at this moment, it becomes very important to talk to them and address their concern by answering their questions and clarifying their doubts about the illness, about the progression of disease, about the treatment, or about the prognosis of the illness. So explain the family or the patient about the illness in a very simple way. For example, to just demonstrate here. For example, if you're talking about the patient's lung condition, if you show them one normal lung x-ray and then the patient's lung x-ray, you'll be able to very comfortably explain them the lung condition of the patient, where you want to actually say that the patient's lungs are affected because of the illness. So this is how you have to use audiovisual aid or different ways to make the patient and family understand the seriousness of the condition. Listening is another important tool which actually helps you connecting. As I said earlier also, listening is therapeutic. So usually when we are overworked or we have number of things to do, we have a tendency to practice, listening like ignoring, pretending, or selective listening. Whereas in this intense situation, patients and others require from us is attentive listening, reflective listening, and empathic listening. Let me tell you, if you practice these listening skills, it's not going to waste time, rather it is going to save time. So when you are attentively listening, you are able to get the required information in one go. When you are reflective listening, that means you are communicating that, yes, I can understand what you are going through. It puts the other person in comfort, and person becomes comfortable in sharing what the patient has to say. In empathic listening, you are able to communicate your care, concern, compassion, and empathy to the patient, which is required to relieve the patient of the anxiety and panic, which is actually going to help condition improve if the patient has this faith that I'm in safe hand and I'm going to improve in this condition. So empathy is another great tool that's helpful when you are communicating with the patient. I've given you a picture to tell you, when you're able to demonstrate, I can feel what you are going through. I can see how painful it is. This is what is the requirement of the situation. So when you start practicing empathy and it's not just in COVID times, even otherwise with your patients, when you're able to communicate with empathy, you're able to see the world through their eyes. You're able to understand their emotions. You will not be judgmental. You will not be even annoyed at their behavior. You will understand, like for example, denial. If I understand that denial is part of illness and I need to address, or for example, anxiety. If I understand that anxiety is part of illness and I need to address, I will not be judgmental. I will understand it, and by communication will automatically cover this aspect of communication that is required to deal with the illness. So a lot of time you'll see anxiety and fear among the patient and their family. We really need to learn to address that without giving any false hopes. So when you're updating the patient or their family, make sure that you are sensitive but straightforward. You have to tell them the truth. Any attempt to soften the blow can lead to vagueness and confusion. So make sure that you tell the truth very honestly, but in a sensitive manner. So trying to minimize this severity can actually create confusion. So when you're talking to them, pause frequently to allow the family or the patient to assimilate the information. What you are saying, you have in your mind. But when the patient or the family listens for the first time, they're so confused and apprehensive, they may not even register what you're saying. They may not even understand. They may not actually know the seriousness of the situation. So you will have to pause in between to allow them to assimilate the information they are getting. And also, in case if they don't understand anything, if you pause in between, they'll get a chance to ask you a question. Use simple language, as simple as possible. Avoid all kind of technical jargons. Use patient's reports or any audio-visual aids that are available at your hand to explain your point and show them the reality of the situation. Keep checking for the understanding of the situation so that you don't have to repeat everything all over again. Use silence to communicate empathy. That's one of the best ways to communicate empathy. When you have no words to say, if you just keep quiet, or for example, if it is a patient, for example, if you're a male therapist and a male patient, a male family member touching on their head or on the back, of course, at this time we are not going to see the patient or the family because we have to maintain that distance from them. But in usual course, these are different ways of communicating empathy to the patient and the family. And then when you become silent, it facilitates discussion and they feel like asking you whatever they have to ask you. So when you are communicating with them, it's very important to check your body language. If your body language anywhere indicates authoritative or aggressive or intimidating attitude, trust me, they will not be comfortable with you. That means somewhere you have failed to use your body language to communicate effectively. The usual response of the patient or the family will be, the first response will be denial. For example, the first example I took with all of you, where you just break the news that the family has to go for quarantine. The immediate response is denial. They just don't believe, they don't agree, they're shocked. They just cannot accept that they are going to be put in quarantine, or the patient needs to be put in ICU, or the patient needs to be admitted in the hospital. Second would be anger, which could also have unhappiness, aggression, blaming, and revengeful. Anger because they are not happy with the way things are going, or they're unhappy. Why me? Why have I got this? I didn't do anything. They may even become aggressive with us. Why do you want to force us to go there? It's not, you cannot force me to go for quarantine or to shift me to a different place. That's anger. Third is bargaining. For example, when you tell them about the seriousness of the situation, or when you tell that the patient condition is actually, very critical, they will get into bargaining, requesting you to do whatever can be done to save the life of the patient. Fourth is depression. Once they are able to understand the reality and see the seriousness of the situation, they are likely to suddenly become quiet. That's in a way that they are depressed, and they are going to finally accept it. So this is called DABDA. It's a grief, response to grief. This is called DABDA: anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. This is a usual response all of us give to any serious situation or any grief situation, and this is what exactly the patient or their family also would go through. So very effectively, we have to learn to deal with this, handle it very impactfully. For example, when you see them in denial, you got to provide them information to help them see the reality. When they're angry, stay calm, listen to them, support them, do not give tit for tat. If they are acting angry, it's not because they're angry with us. They're angry because they didn't expect them to fall sick or become prey to the illness. When they are bargaining, please don't get annoyed on them saying, take as much money as you want, or do whatever best you can do, but save my patient. Understand, had I been in this situation, had my family member been this sick, even I would have requested that do whatever best is possible to save the patient. Here, you got to assert, help them see the reality, but please don't become aggressive with them or don't become annoyed with them. So when you see them becoming quiet and finally accepting, this is the time to give them direction, what next has to be done. And then also encourage them to take these following steps. Now, simultaneously, I'm sure we are being affected by what is happening around us. It's a definitely very overwhelming situation for all of us. For example, we all know that we are still uncertain about the outcome of disease. We do not know what course this disease is going to take, or what is going to be the ultimate outcome of the disease, especially in the absence of any definite protocol of treatment. Fear that we are going to destroy the patient's or the family's hope when we say the patient's condition is serious, or maybe we will not be able to save the patient. Again, we feel very unhappy and very inadequate in the face of uncontrollable disease. Since we don't have exact treatment, we still don't have vaccines available, we don't have any fixed treatment protocols available. So all that is giving us inadequate in the face of this illness. At the same time, sometimes we are not prepared to manage the unanticipated emotional reactions. We have done everything for the patient, but the family is still unhappy with us. They are not unhappy with us, but they are unhappy with the outcome. But when they want to express this anger, usually the healthcare professionals are the nearest target, and that is how we get entrapped in this situation. Sometimes we also give a very optimistic picture, especially if the patient condition is not very serious. It's a young patient, very minimal symptoms, and we hope and we expect the patient will have very light course of symptoms and will recover out of it. And unfortunately, if the patient develops some serious condition, we feel very bad and sad that we actually painted a very optimistic kind of a picture. So how do you prevent this from happening? Because we got to take proactively some action so that we don't face this situation. For example, we have to stay updated with what is happening across the globe, what is the treatment protocol being recommended by our healthcare delivery system. To the patient and family, we have to give realistic expectation. So when we are fearing that we are going to destroy their hope, we have to appreciate the importance of updating, because that is going to prepare the family for the situation and they're going to react less aggressively. We got to accept professional limitation, although the whole world is working on finding of treatment and vaccines around it, but then it's going to take time. We have to keep the family updated if we don't want to face the unanticipated emotional reaction. If we are able to keep them in loop, answer their questions, explain them about the whatever is being done in the patient care, that helps prepare them for the eventuality. And at the same time, we got to learn to observe emotions. So here I give a very interesting concept. We all have learned medical triage. I always say learn even social triaging. So social triaging is a new term that I have coined, where you got to actually observe the patient and the family who is more likely to react aggressively. So if you can see that, please proactively handle that situation, talk to the patient's family, connect with them, answer their questions, address their concern, keep them in loop so that they are mentally prepared whenever in case if some bad news actually comes. So we also learn to, first of all, control our own emotions and handle their emotions. So it's a very tricky kind of a thing, but we got to really learn to handle it. And not only for this situation, anytime you're going to break bad news, you got to learn to deal with that. Sometimes we feel embarrassed at having an optimistic picture. I always say, please give realistic expectation. No treatment is risk-free. Even a small test dose can lead to death. So we got to really be very careful when we are giving the expectation. Sometimes for certain OPD procedures, we say it's a small OPD procedure, don't worry, nothing is going to happen. But we have seen patients collapsing after, a small OPD procedure. So in medicine, no procedure is risk-free. So we have to be very careful when we are giving them the expectation. A very important message that I want to give you here is, please don't forget to document all communication. The thumb rule is communicate what you document and document what you communicate. Because at the end of the day, when this is going to be over, I don't know how many of us are going to be legally sued for, lapses in patient care. So these documents are going to be of great help in saving us to demonstrate that we have done everything possible in the patient care. Once you break the bad news, patient or the family is going to feel very anxious and they may feel lost. So this is the time where we have to actually be aware of the protocol. So what has to be done in the patient care, we got to be clearly knowing, and we need to communicate to the patient and their family. Explain them what next plan of action would be. Arrange for appropriate referral in case if the patient has to be transferred to a different hospital. Give contact details to the patient's family so that they know where you have a patient whom they can contact when they want to know about the patient's welfare. And also reassure to the patient and the family that they are not going to be abandoned. They are going to be looked after. Only thing is the care protocol is going to change. Now, this was about the patient. Considering that all of you are in direct patient care and it's a very overwhelming kind of a situation, ensuring your psychosocial well-being is very important. Again, this has to be addressed mindfully and proactively. It will not happen automatically. I know all of us are overwhelmed with long duty and exhaustion. Many of you are not even in meeting your family members over a long period of time. So you must be missing your family and friends. You must also be overwhelmed with the volume of the patients that are coming to you and the acuity of the situation. Some of you may be actually angry with unpreparedness, especially where we somewhere missed to take precautionary steps at the right time. Many of you will be frustrated over the lack of supplies because nobody expected the situation to be this bad, especially some of the hotspot areas. Then many of you may also feel guilt and feel bad about inability to save all, especially when we get to hear when there are two patients, one is very elderly and the second one is younger one. So the doctor has to take a call whom to put on ventilator and who who need to be, kind of, kept on care. So this is something, a very difficult decision. So at times it leads to guilt and unhappiness in the concerned clinician. So there can be common thoughts of anger and anxiety that this isn't fair, I don't deserve this, we don't have even enough PPEs, I may catch infection, and there is no sure shot protocol of treatment, we may run out of medicine, there are not enough ventilators, why can't management or system or government provide us with more facilities? So all these could be leading to a lot of anxiety and anger. I know uncertainty of situation leads to anger and anxiety, but let me remind you, we don't grow when things are easy, we grow when we face challenges. Even the epic Bhagavad Gita came into being in the middle of Mahabharata. It was the middle of the battle that Arjun decided not to fight the battle. And there came Bhagavad Gita, where Lord Krishna gave the discourse of duty. So let's see the brighter side of it, that it's going to actually help us, equip with more abilities and confidence to deal with challenges to come. Now, I'm going to quickly share you a few strategies that will help you combat stress and ensure psychosocial well-being of yours and your team. For example, please make a list of things that are bothering you. There can be number of things. It could be maybe 8, 10, or 15 things that are bothering you. So have these 2 circles in front of you. One is yellow and second one is blue. All the things which are bothering you, which are true, but are not in your control, would go in the yellow circle. Then there would be things over which you have direct control. They'll go in the blue circle. For example, overall infection rate, when others are not taking precautions, or when patients and public are not handling corona seriously, all these are true, but maybe they're not in your direct control. So even if you're thinking about these issues, that's not going to help you. On the other hand, there are things over which you have direct control. For example, taking all precautions or explaining to the patient or their family members, whoever comes across you. This is in your control. So very mindfully, very carefully, we all have to focus on the blue circle. If you will focus your energy to yellow circle, that's going to actually aggravate anxiety in. So very carefully, every time I have a situation or a question, I have to first choose whether it goes to yellow circle or it goes to blue circle. And then ask yourself, what can I do to deal with this situation? If you think you have a way to deal with it, put this in the blue circle, you will have an answer to it. If you think it is not in my direct control, let it go to the yellow circle. So I've shown you things that are in your control and things that are not in your control. So proactively keep your focus on the blue circle and mindfully focus on finding solutions rather than the problems. There will be n number of problems around you. Focus on finding solutions to the problems that you can address directly. There's another important thing that I want to recommend to you, and that is learn to accurately assess and estimate the risk. Because the moment you will overestimate the risk, you are likely to see a lion in a cat. And that's going to aggravate your anxiety or fear or stress or unhappiness. So very carefully, we have to learn to estimate or accurately assess what is the risk. In case if I'm taking all possible precautions, in case if I don't have anybody around me who is corona affected, then the chances of the risk is much lesser. So we got to assess the accuracy of the risk. Then second thing that I would recommend to you is please keep your media appetite in check. So many messages, so many videos are being circulated on WhatsApp, on Facebook, and all possible social media. So you really got to mindfully check your appetite for media intake, because unnecessary message is going to trigger anxiety and fear in all of us. See, media has the responsibility of sharing everything that's happening across the world to public, but public mindfully has to choose how much to take, what to take. Third important thing that I can recommend to you is check your self-talk. Your self-talk, that the talking that we do to ourselves is the program that we give to our mind and body. So very carefully, we have to check the quality of the self-talk we are doing to ourselves. In case if your self-talk is negative, you are giving negative food to your body and mind. So your body and mind is going to go in the negative gear. On the other side, if your self-talk is positive, your body and mind will go into the positive gear. So you got to be very careful about the self-talk that you do. Because if you are doing too much of negative talking, this is what is going to happen with you. Again, at times when you feel unnecessarily being, afraid of situation or something that's bothering you, we got to confront our fears. For example, if I have a fear, I have this, I can have this, I can have this. So maybe I need to tell myself, okay, have it, now what? That means that would be the time when actually I'll start thinking, now how do I save the situation or how do I handle it? So we got to really, sometimes confront the fear very firmly. Very important is to stay in touch with positive people. Again, anxiety, stress, fear, these are all very contagious. In case if you are in the company of people who are talking too much of negative things about people, society, world, you're likely to get affected by their communication. So mindfully stay in touch with in the company of positive people. At workplace, please avoid being aggressive. Again, aggression is contagious. The moment you will act aggressive, your team is likely to get affected by it, and there will be tit for tat. Because the moment you are insulting somebody, hurting somebody, they are going to give you back in some or the other way. They may not reply you back, but they may become cold, they may become disinterested, they may become unhelpful, they may get into cold war with you. So very mindfully, we have to avoid being aggressive at the workplace. So consciously stay calm and cheerful at your workplace. Stay in touch with your family and loved one. Very important, especially if you're not visiting your family on daily basis. Make sure that you talk to them on regular basis. Thankfully, a lot of mechanisms are available now. WhatsApp messages can be done, video calling can be done, Facebook calling can be done. So make use of these, all media. Stay in touch with them. But again, when you're talking to them, when you're interacting with them, please stay cheerful. Because for those few minutes when you're going to talk to your family, if you appear cheerful, this will be like charging for your family. Similarly, your family also will be, cheerful with you and they will charge you. So it's a vicious cycle. If you are negative, you will transfer negativity to your family. They'll feel upset, apprehensive, worry about you, and that's what they're going to transfer to you. So very mindfully, we have to not only interact with them on regular basis, but do it in a very, very good manner. So these are last few tips that I want to share with you. Very important. If you can take care of 4 things, I can tell you most of this stress can be looked after. 1, please look after your sleep very well. 6 to 8 hours of sleep on regular basis, everybody must catch. Even if you're not able to sleep at one go for 6 hours or 8 hours, make sure that you get it in parts. Sleep is a biological need. All your physical and mental wear and tear takes place during sleep. So it's very important, very essential to make sure that your biological need is looked after. Even your emotional issues or anxiety provoking issues get clarified or get sorted during sleep. You may have seen many a times we sleep with the problem, and when we get up, we have a solution to it, because when your conscious mind is sleeping, your subconscious mind is doing the sorting of things. So please make sure that you get 6 to 8 hours of sleep. Second, take 3 meals a day on regular basis. 3 meals means 3 meals. Please don't miss your food. Take enough diet, because your body needs energy, especially in hectic times where you have long standing running around. Your body needs energy, so you must take regular 3 meals a day. You cannot put your car on the highway without your tank full. So you got to make sure that you take enough food before you're going for duty. Use all precautions and PPE to protect yourself and your team member. Make sure that every team member of yours is protected with quality PPEs. Many a times I'm getting to hear that in certain places, the support staff or the nursing staff or some subordinates are not getting good quality PPE. In case if that happens, please remember, if they get infected, you are bound to get infected. So every team member should be taken care of, should be protected, and in any case, every life is important. So we got to really make sure that we save every life. Address your concern on regular basis. mindfully stay calm and cheerful, stop complaining and blaming. All this will come in looking after your emotional health. So as I said, look after 4 things and you can look after 70 to 80% of your stress. One, 6 to 8 hours of sleep. Second, 3 meals a day. Third, take all precautions and PPE. Fourth is look after your emotional health. Very important thing here is your attitude towards your work. That plays a very big role in deciding how you're going to feel when when you do. I'm reminded of one story which can help understand the importance of your attitude. There was a building being done at one place, and there were laborers who were actually working on the building. So somebody who was passing by that building stopped nearby and asked one of the laborer and asked him, "What are you doing?" And that laborer said that I am working to earn money for my family, for my kids. Many of us work thinking that, okay, it's my duty, so I need to work. He went to the second uh, laborer and asked him, what are you doing? So he was very unhappy with this situation. He was very annoyed with everybody. So in a very angry and rash tone, he said, can't you see that I'm breaking news? Are you blind? Can't you see that I'm working on construction? So many of us may be thinking, oh, it's a very challenging situation, very stressful situation. Why am I here? Why should it happen to me? Why couldn't I be at a better place? People who are sitting at home, they are in a better position. So he went to the third laborer and he asked him, what are you doing? So that person, he took him to nearby map. There was actually a building map, put on the board. So he shows this map to the person as he says, this temple is coming over this site and I'm constructing this temple. All three were doing the same job, but all three were doing the different mindset. Many of you may be thinking it's a very depressing state. And many of you may be thinking, oh, how fortunate I am that I am in the front line and I'm handling the situation. So it's all to do with our attitude. It's all to do with the way we want to look at this situation. I'm ending it here. Another short story. I'm sure you may have heard it by one of the speakers of the webinar. I'm just copying from him because I like this story very much. There was a jungle fire and all the birds and animals of the jungle started, running out of the jungle because they thought they will not be able to save themselves. So this bird, a small bird, it comes out of the jungle and goes to the water body, picks little water and throws on the jungle fire. Now other animals who are watching her do this ask this bird, do you think this water will extinguish the fire? She says, no, this is not going to extinguish the fire. But when the history will be written, I will be written as a warrior and you will be written as a spectator. So we can all choose whether we want to be called as a warrior or we want to be called as a spectator. Thank you so much.